A black teen is shamed in first class, drenched by a cruel passenger. Like and subscribe to see her shocking comeback in our latest video. And don't miss what's next, Emma. The soft hum of the airplane engines filled the luxurious first-class cabin of SkyElite Airlines, the air tinged with the faint scent of leather and champagne. The seats plush and spacious, their cream upholstery a stark contrast to the sleek black accents of the interior. The cabin was a haven of exclusivity, reserved for the elite, the wealthy, the privileged. But on this sunny afternoon, a different passenger settled into seat 2A. Nia Brooks, a high school girl of African descent. Her presence, a quiet disruption in the world of first-class travel. Nia wore a simple navy sweater and jeans, her curly hair pulled into a neat ponytail, her brown eyes wide with a mix of excitement and nervousness. She'd never flown first class before, but this trip was a special gift from her mother, a reward for her excellent grades, a chance to visit her grandmother in Chicago. Nia clutched her boarding pass, her smile small but genuine. She felt out of place among the well-dressed passengers, but she was here, and that was enough. She settled into her seat, her hands smoothing the soft leather, her heart racing with anticipation. The cabin was quiet, the other passengers engrossed in their devices or sipping drinks served by the attentive flight crew. But as Nia adjusted her seatbelt, a shadow loomed beside her. A heavy-set woman in a loud floral blouse plopped into seat 2B, her movements heavy, her perfume overpowering. The woman, Linda Carter, turned to Nia, her blue eyes narrowing, her lips curling into a sneer. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice sharp, her tone dripping with disdain. Nia's smile faltered, her hands tightening on her seatbelt. I'm flying to Chicago," she said, her voice soft. Linda's sneer widened, her voice loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. "I mean in first class," she said, her words cutting. "This isn't your place. You don't belong here." Nia's heart sank, her cheeks burning with shame. She wanted to shrink into her seat, to disappear, but she forced herself to speak. "My mom got me the ticket," she said, her voice trembling. "I have every right to be here." Linda laughed, a cold, mocking sound that echoed through the cabin. "Your mom?" she said, her tone sarcastic. "What did she do? Win a lottery? People like you don't belong in first class. You're probably in the wrong section." Nia's throat tightened, her hands clenching into fists. "I'm not," she said, her voice steadier now. "I'm supposed to be here." Linda's eyes flicked over Nia's sweater, her jeans, her sneakers, her sneer deepening. "Supposed to be here?" she said, her voice dripping with contempt. "Look at you. You can't even afford to dress for first class. You're an embarrassment." The words hit Nia like a slap, her eyes stinging with tears she refused to let fall. She wanted to fight back, to tell Linda she was wrong, but the weight of her judgment, the stares of the other passengers, kept her silent. She turned to the window, her heart pounding, her mind racing. She just wanted to get through this flight, to see her grandmother, to escape this woman's cruelty. But Linda wasn't done, her voice a constant stream of venom. "Where are you even from?" she asked, her tone sharp. "You don't look like you belong anywhere near here. Probably some poor neighborhood, right?" Nia's hands trembled, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm from here." "Wishum," she said, "and I'm going to see my family." Linda scoffed, her voice loud. "Family?" she said. "I bet they're as out of place as you are. First class isn't for people like you. It's for people who've earned it." Nia's heart ached, her tears threatening to spill. She wanted to scream, to tell Linda she didn't know anything about her family. But the fear of making a scene, of drawing more attention, kept her quiet. She stared out the window, the clouds a blur through her tears, her hands clutching the armrest. The flight attendants began their pre-takeoff checks, their voices a soft murmur over the intercom. But Nia barely heard them, her mind consumed by Linda's words. The other passengers glanced over, their whispers a mix of curiosity and discomfort. "She's being awful," one man murmured to his companion. "Poor girl," the woman replied, but no one spoke up. No one intervened. Nia felt alone, her heart heavy. Her excitement for the trip replaced by a deep sense of shame. She didn't belong here, not in Linda's eyes, not in the eyes of the passengers who watched in silence. The plane taxied down the runway, the engines roaring as it took off. Nia's hands tightened on the armrest, her mind racing. She didn't know how she'd survive this flight, how she'd endure Linda's cruelty, but she knew she had to. She had to hold on, to stay strong, to prove she belonged. Little did she know. The worst was yet to come, a moment of public humiliation that would push her to her breaking point, a moment that would change everything, setting the stage for a reckoning that would shake the cabin to its core. Mbano, so tu fan 1.22, GU when you da việc truk. Yan kwalayam, fan 2, sung dot khoi fat, Linda miet thi Nia, toi thiêu mort. 102. The SkyElite Airlines flight had just reached cruising altitude. The soft hum of the engines, a steady backdrop to the opulent first-class cabin. The cream-colored seats and sleek black accents exuding luxury. But for Nia, the plush surroundings felt like a battlefield. Her heart pounded in her chest, her hands gripping the armrests of seat 2A, her navy sweater slightly wrinkled from her tense posture. Her curly ponytail brushing against her shoulder as she tried to focus on the clouds outside the window. But the venomous presence of Linda Carter in seat 2B made it impossible to find peace. Linda's floral blouse seemed to scream for attention, her heavy-set frame taking up more than her share of the space, her blue eyes glinting with a malice that hadn't relented since takeoff, her voice a constant stream of cruelty. "I bet you've never even been on a plane before, have you?" she said. Her tone sharp, her words loud enough for the nearby passengers to hear. Nia's cheeks burned, her throat tightening. "I have," she said, her voice soft but firm. "This isn't my first time." Linda laughed, a cold, mocking sound that echoed through the cabin. "Oh, please," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "You probably begged for a free ticket. People like you always expect handouts, don't you?" Nia's hands clenched into fists, her nails digging into her palms. She wanted to scream, to tell Linda she was wrong, but the fear of escalating the situation, of drawing more attention, kept her silent. She turned back to the window, her eyes stinging with tears, her heart aching. She just wanted to get through this flight, to escape this woman's cruelty. But Linda wasn't done, her voice a relentless assault. "Look at you," she said, her tone sharp. "You can't even afford a decent outfit. You're embarrassing everyone in first class. You should be in economy, where you belong." The words hit Nia like a punch, her breath catching, her tears threatening to spill. "I'm here because my mom got me this seat," she said, her voice trembling. "I belong here just as much as you do." Linda's sneer widened, her voice loud. "Your mom?" she said, her tone mocking. "What's she do? Clean houses? That's the only way someone like you gets a ticket like this." Nia's heart sank, her hands trembling. "My mom works hard," she said, her voice breaking. "She's amazing." Linda scoffed, her voice a mix of amusement and contempt. "Amazing, huh?" she said. "I bet she's as out of place as you are. You don't belong here, you're a charity case." The other passengers glanced over, their whispers a mix of curiosity and discomfort. "She's being awful," a man in a suit murmured to his companion. "That poor girl," the woman replied, but no one intervened, their silence a weight on Nia's shoulders. She felt alone, her heart heavy. Her excitement for the trip replaced by a deep sense of shame. The flight attendants moved through the table and coffee, their trays of drinks and snacks a quiet interruption. One of them, a woman named Emily, approached Nia and Linda, her smile professional but strained. "Can I get you anything?" she asked, her voice soft. Nia forced a smile, her voice barely a whisper. "Just water, please," she said, her tone polite. Linda's eyes flicked to Emily, her tone sharp. "I'll have a champagne," she said, her voice loud. "And make sure it's cold." Unlike her, she gestured to Nia, her sneer a dagger. Emily nodded, her smile faltering, but she didn't respond. Moving to the next row, Nia's cheeks burned, her hands trembling. She wanted to disappear, to escape this woman's cruelty. But she was trapped. The flight still hours from landing. She tried to focus on the clouds, on the thought of seeing her grandmother. But Linda's voice cut through her thoughts. "You know, they should have stricter rules for first class," she said, her tone sharp. "They let just anyone in here now. It's disgusting." Nia's throat tightened, her voice a whisper. "I'm not doing anything to you," she said, her words a plea. Linda turned to her, her eyes glinting with malice. "You're here," she said, her voice cold. "That's enough. You're ruining my flight. You don't belong here. You never will." Nia's tears finally spilled over, her hands shaking. She wiped her eyes quickly, her heart aching. She wanted to fight back, to tell Linda she was wrong, but the weight of her words, the stares of the other passengers, kept her silent. She turned back to the window, her breath uneven, her mind racing. She didn't know how she'd survive this flight, how she'd endure Linda's cruelty, but she knew she had to. She had to hold on, to stay strong, to prove she belonged. The flight attendants returned with their drinks, Emily placing a glass of water in front of Nia. Her smile strained. "Here you go," she said, her tone soft, but Linda's voice cut through. "She doesn't need that," she said, her tone sharp. "She's already out of place. Don't make it worse." Emily hesitated, her eyes flicking to Nia, but she didn't respond. Moving to the next row, Nia's heart sank, her hands trembling. She felt alone, her shame a heavy weight. She didn't know how much more she could take, but she knew the worst was yet to come. A moment of public humiliation that would push her to her breaking point. A moment that would test her strength, her truth, her very identity. But the first-class cabin of SkyElite Airlines felt more like a pressure cooker than a luxury retreat as the flight soared through the clouds. The soft hum of the engines a deceptive backdrop to the escalating tension. Nia sat rigidly in seat 2A, her navy sweater now clinging to her skin from the nervous sweat that had begun to bead on her forehead. Her curly ponytail slightly askew, her brown eyes darting between the window and the woman beside her, Linda Carter, whose presence in seat 2B was a constant source of torment. The floral blouse Linda wore seemed to mock the elegance of the cabin, her heavy-set frame taking up more space than necessary, her blue eyes glinting with a malice that hadn't relented since takeoff, her voice a relentless assault on Nia's fragile composure. "You're taking up too much space," Linda said, her tone sharp, her words loud enough for the nearby passengers to hear. Nia's heart pounded, her hands gripping the armrests. "I'm not," she said, her voice soft but firm. "I'm just sitting here." Linda's sneer widened, her voice dripping with contempt. "Sitting here?" she said, her tone mocking. "You're in my way. You're making me uncomfortable. People like you always do." Nia's cheeks burned, her throat tightening. She wanted to shrink into her seat, to disappear, but she forced herself to hold her ground. "I'm not doing anything to you," she said, her voice trembling. Linda laughed, a cold, mocking sound that echoed through the cabin. "You're here," she said, her tone sharp. "That's enough. You're ruining my flight. You don't belong in first class." The words hit Nia like a slap, her breath catching, her tears threatening to spill. She turned back to the window, her heart aching. She just wanted to get through this flight, to escape this woman's cruelty. But Linda wasn't done, her voice a constant stream of venom. "I bet you don't even know how to behave in a place like this." "Yeah," she said, her tone sharp. "You're probably used to the back of the bus, aren't you?" Nia's hands clenched into fists, her nails digging into her palms, the phrase a dagger that pierced through her calm. "That's not true," she said, her voice breaking. "I belong here just as much as you do." Linda's eyes narrowed, her voice loud. Belong? She said, her tone mocking. You'll never belong here. Look at you. You're a mess. You're an embarrassment to first class. The other passengers glanced over, their whispers a mix of curiosity and discomfort. She's relentless, a man in a suit murmured to his companion. That girl doesn't deserve this. The woman replied, but no one intervened. Their silence a weight on Nia's shoulders. She felt alone, her shame a heavy burden. Linda's cruelty escalated as she reached for her handbag. Her movements deliberate. She pulled out a magazine, flipping through it with exaggerated care. Then accidentally let it slip from her hands, the glossy pages landing on Nia's lap. Oops, Linda said, her tone dripping with sarcasm. Pick that up, would you? Since you're so good at being in the wrong place. Nia's hands trembled as she picked up the magazine. Her heart pounding, she handed it back to Linda, her voice barely a whisper. Here, she said, her tone polite despite the humiliation. Linda snatched it from her, her sneer deepening. Don't touch my things, she said, her voice sharp. I don't want your hands on them. Who knows where they've been? Nia's tears stung her eyes, her hands shaking. She wanted to fight back, to tell Linda she was wrong, but the weight of her words, the stares of the other passengers, kept her silent. She turned back to the window, her breath uneven, her mind racing. She didn't know how much more she could take. The flight attendants moved through the cabin, their trays of drinks a quiet interruption. Emily, the attendant who had served them earlier, approached again, her smile strained. Is everything okay here? She asked, her voice soft. Nia forced a smile, her voice barely a whisper. I'm fine, she said, her tone polite, but Linda's voice cut through. She's not fine, she said, her tone sharp. She's making me uncomfortable. She doesn't belong here. Can't you do something? Emily hesitated, her eyes flicking to Nia. I'll see what I can do, she said, her tone uncertain. She moved to the next row, leaving Nia alone with Linda's cruelty. Nia's heart sank, her hands trembling. She felt trapped, the cabin a prison, Linda's voice a constant assault. You see, Linda said, her tone triumphant. Even the staff know you're out of place. They're probably laughing at you in the galley. Nia's tears finally spilled over, her hands shaking. She wiped her eyes quickly, her heart aching. She wanted to scream, to tell Linda she didn't know anything about her. But the fear of making a scene, of drawing more attention, kept her quiet. She turned back to the window, the clouds a blur through her tears, her hands clutching the armrest. The other passengers continued to whisper, their voices a mix of sympathy and inaction. She's being awful, a woman in a silk scarf murmured. Someone should say something. Her companion replied, but no one did. Nia felt their stares, a weight she couldn't escape, her shame a heavy burden. She didn't know how she'd survive this flight, how she'd endure Linda's cruelty, but she knew she had to. She had to hold on, to stay strong, to prove she belonged. The tension in the cabin was palpable, the air thick with the weight of Linda's malice. Nia's heart raced, her mind racing. She didn't know what would happen next, but she knew it wouldn't be good. A moment of public humiliation was looming, a moment that would push her to her breaking point, a moment that would test her strength, her truth, her very identity. The first-class cabin of SkyElite Airlines felt like a battlefield as the flight continued its journey through the clouds. The soft hum of the engines, a cruel irony against the storm of tension brewing inside. Nia sat in seat 2A, her navy sweater now clinging to her skin from the nervous sweat that had soaked through, her curly ponytail sagging slightly, her brown eyes glistening with unshed tears, her hands gripping the armrests as if they were her only lifeline. The luxurious surroundings of the cabin, with its plush cream seats and sleek black accents, felt like a mockery of her situation. Linda Carter in seat 2B was a relentless force of malice. Her floral blouse, a loud contrast to her venomous demeanor. her heavy-set frame leaning into Naya's space, her blue eyes glinting with a cruel satisfaction as she continued her assault. "I can't believe they let you sit here," she said, her voice sharp, her tone loud enough for the entire cabin to hear. "You're making everyone uncomfortable. You don't belong in first class." Nia's heart pounded, her throat tightening. "I'm not doing anything to you," she said, her voice trembling but firm. Linda's sneer widened, her voice dripping in with contempt. "You're here," she said, her tone cold. "That's enough. You are ruining my flight. You're a disgrace." Nia's cheeks burned, her hands shaking. She wanted to fight back, to tell Linda she was wrong. But the weight of her words, the stares of the other passengers, kept her silent. She turned back to the window, her breath uneven, her mind racing. She just wanted to survive this flight, to escape this woman's cruelty. But the worst was yet to come. The flight attendants began their rusted meal service, their trays laden with gourmet snacks and drinks. A quiet interruption to the tension in the cabin. Emily, the attendant who had served them earlier, approached Nia and Linda, her smile strained, her voice soft. "Would you like something to eat?" she asked, her tone professional but tinged with unease. Nia forced a smile, her voice barely a whisper. "Just a sandwich. Please," she said, her tone polite. Linda's eyes flicked to Emily, her tone sharp. "I'll have the same," she said, her voice loud. "And a glass of water. Make it quick." Emily nodded, her smile faltering. She placed a small tray in front of Nia, a sandwich and a glass of water, her movements careful. "Here you go," she said, her tone soft. But Linda's voice cut through. "She doesn't need that," she said, her tone sharp. "She's already out of place. Don't make it worse." Nia's heart sank, her hands trembling. She wanted to disappear, to escape this woman's cruelty. But she was trapped, the cabin a prison. Emily hesitated, her eyes flicking to Nia, but she didn't respond. Moving to place Linda's tray in front of her, a sandwich and a glass of water. But as she did, Linda's movements became deliberate. Her hand accidentally knocking the glass of water off her tray, the liquid spilling directly onto Nia's head. The cold water soaked through her hair, dripping down her face, her navy sweater now clinging to her skin, the sandwich on her tray ruined. Nia gasped, her hands flying to her face, her breath catching. "I'm so sorry," she stammered, her voice breaking, but Linda's laugh was loud, a cruel sound that echoed through the cabin. "Oops," she said, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "Look at that. Now you're even more of a mess. Maybe this'll teach you to stay in your lane." Nia's tears spilled over, her hands shaking as she wiped the water from her face, her heart aching. The other passengers gasped, their whispers a mix of shock and discomfort. "That was on purpose," a man in a suit murmured. "She's awful," his companion replied, but no one intervened. Their silence a weight on Nia's shoulders. Emily stood frozen, her tray still in hand, her expression a mix of shock and unease. Nia looked to her, her voice trembling. "Can you help me?" she asked, her tone a desperate plea, but Emily's face hardened, her voice cold. "You should have been more careful," she said, her tone sharp. "Maybe you shouldn't be here if you can't handle it." Nia's heart sank, her tears falling faster. "I didn't do anything," she said, her voice breaking. "She did it on purpose." Emily's eyes flicked to Linda, who smirked, her tone triumphant. "She's causing trouble, Linda said, her voice loud. "She doesn't belong here. I told you." Emily nodded, her expression unreadable. "I'll get you a towel," she said, her tone dismissive. She turned to leave, her heels clicking softly against the cabin floor, leaving Nia alone with her shame, the water still dripping down her face. Her sweater soaked, her sandwich ruined. Nia felt the weight of the moment, the humiliation, a heavy burden. She wanted to scream, to fight back, to tell Linda and Emily they were wrong, but the stares of the other passengers, the weight of their judgment, kept her silent. She wiped her face with her sleeve, her hands trembling, her heart aching. She felt small, invisible, unworthy. The other passengers continued to whisper, their voices a mix of sympathy and inaction. "That was awful," a woman in a silk scarf murmured. "Someone should do something." Her companion replied, but no one did. Nia felt their stares. A weight she couldn't escape, her shame a heavy burden. She didn't know how she'd survive the rest of this flight, how she'd endure Linda's cruelty, but she knew she had to. She had to hold on, to stay strong, to prove she belonged. The tension in the cabin was palpable, the air thick with the weight of Linda's malice. Nia's heart raced, her mind racing. She didn't know what would happen next, but she knew it wouldn't be good. A moment of reckoning was coming. A moment that would test her strength, her truth, her very identity. But the first-class cabin of SkyElite Airlines felt like a suffocating burden as the flight continued its journey. The plush cream seats and sleek black accents, now a cruel mockery of the luxury Nia had once been excited to experience. Water still dripped from her curly ponytail, her navy sweater clinging to her skin, the damp fabric a constant reminder of the humiliation she just endured. Her brown eyes were red-rimmed, her hands trembling as she wiped the last of the water from her face. Her heart pounded with a mix of shame and rising anger. Linda Carter in seat 2B sat back with a smug satisfaction, her floral blouse a loud contrast to the coldness in her blue eyes, her sneer a permanent fixture as she watched Nia struggle. "Look at you," she said, her voice sharp, her tone loud enough for the entire cabin to hear. "You're a mess. Maybe now you'll learn your place. You don't belong here." Nia's throat tightened, her hands clenching into fists, her tears threatening to spill again. "You did this on purpose," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "You poured that water on me." Linda laughed, a cold, mocking sound that echoed through the cabin. "Prove it," she said, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "No one's going to believe you. You're just a nobody trying to cause trouble." Nia's heart ached, her shame a heavy burden. But something inside her snapped, a quiet fire igniting amidst the pain. She wasn't going to let this woman break her. Not anymore, Boss. She straightened in her seat, her voice steadier now. "I'm not a nobody," she said, her words a quiet defiance. "And I do belong here." Linda's sneer faltered for a fraction of a second, her confidence shaken by Nia's newfound resolve. But she quickly recovered, her voice sharp. "You'll never belong," she said, her tone cold. "You're out of your league, and everyone here knows it." The other passengers glanced over, their whispers a mix of curiosity and discomfort. "She's pushing her too far," a man in a suit murmured. "That girl's been through enough," his companion replied, but no one intervened, their silence a weight on Nia's shoulders. She felt their stares, a mix of sympathy and inaction, her shame a heavy burden, but she refused to let it define her. She reached into her tuamkan, her hands trembling as she pulled out her phone. "I'm calling my mom," she said, her voice loud enough for Linda to hear. Her tone a mix of defiance and desperation. Linda laughed, her voice a mix of amusement and contempt. "Your mom," she said, her tone mocking. "What's she gonna do? Come pick you up from first class? I bet she's as pathetic as you are." Nia's hands shook as she dialed, her heart racing. "She'll know what to do," she said, her voice steady despite the fear. The phone rang, each tone an eternity, until a voice answered. "Nia, honey, what's wrong?" Her mother's voice was a lifeline, a warm anchor in the storm. Nia's tears spilled over, her voice breaking. "Mom, I'm on the flight. There's a woman. She poured water on me. She's been saying awful things, and the flight attendant didn't help. They think I don't belong here." Her mother's voice hardened, a fierce edge to it. "Stay right there," she said, her tone a command. "I'm coming. Don't let them make you feel small." Nia nodded, her tears falling faster. "Okay," she whispered, her voice trembling. She hung up, her hands shaking as she put the phone down, her heart racing. Linda's laugh cut through the silence, her voice loud. "Calling for help?" she said, her tone mocking. "You think your mom's gonna save you? That's pathetic. You're just making a fool of yourself." Naya's hands clenched into fists, her voice steady. "She'll be here," she said, her words a quiet promise. "And you'll see." Linda's sneer widened, her voice sharp. "I'll see what?" she said. "Another nobody trying to act important? You're wasting everyone's time." The flight attendant, Emily, returned with a towel, her expression cold. "Here, Shishem," she said, her tone dismissive. She handed the towel to Nia, her eyes flicking to Linda. "Try not to cause any more trouble, Ma," she said, her voice sharp. Nia took the towel, her hands trembling. "I didn't cause trouble," she said, her voice breaking. "She did." Emily's eyes narrowed, her tone cold. "Then you're the one who doesn't belong here." "Oh," she said, her words a dagger. "Maybe you should have stayed in economy." Naya's heart sank, her tears falling faster. She wiped her face with the towel, her hands shaking, her shame a heavy burden. But her mother's voice echoed in her mind. "Don't let them make you feel small," a mantra that gave her strength. She straightened in her seat, her voice steady. "I belong here, Chiyawante," she said, her words a quiet defiance. "And I'm not going anywhere." Linda's laugh was loud, her voice a mix of amusement and contempt. "You're delusional," she said, her tone sharp. "You'll never belong. You're a charity case. Nothing more." The other passengers continued to whisper, their voices a mix of sympathy and inaction. "She's awful," a woman in a silk scarf murmured. "That poor girl," her companion replied. But no one intervened. Naya felt their stares, a weight she couldn't escape, her shame a heavy burden. But she refused to let it define her. She held on to her mother's promise, her heart racing, her mind racing. She didn't know how much longer she could endure this flight, how much more she could take. But she knew help was coming. She knew her mother would be there, and that gave her hope. The tension in the cabin was palpable, the air thick with the weight of Linda's malice. Nia's heart raced, her mind racing. She didn't know what would happen next, but she knew it wouldn't be good. A moment of reckoning was coming. A moment that would test her strength, her truth, her very identity. But the SkyElite Airlines flight began its descent into Chicago, the soft hum of the engine shifting to a lower pitch as the plane cut through the clouds. The first-class cabin, still a battleground of tension. The plush cream seats and sleek black accents now a stark contrast to the emotional storm that had raged for hours. Naya sat in seat 2A, her navy sweater still damp from the water Linda had poured on her, her curly ponytail now loose and frizzy. Her brown eyes red from crying but burning with a quiet resolve. Her hands gripped the armrests, her heart pounding as the plane touched down. The landing a jarring reminder that this nightmare was nearing its end, but not without one final confrontation. Linda Carter in seat 2B sat back with a smug satisfaction, her floral blouse wrinkled from the long flight, her blue eyes glinting with a cruel triumph, her voice a constant assault even as the plane taxied to the gate. "Finally," she said, her tone sharp, her voice loud enough for the entire cabin to hear. "We're rid of you. Maybe now I can enjoy my trip without you ruining it." Naya's throat tightened, her hands trembling. "I didn't ruin anything," she said, her voice steady despite the fear. "You did." Linda's sneer widened, her voice dripping with contempt. "You ruined everything," she said, her tone cold. "You don't belong here. You never did. You're a disgrace to first class." Naya's heart ached, her shame a heavy burden. But she refused to let Linda's words break her. She straightened in her seat, her voice steady. "I belong here, Bea," she said, her words a quiet defiance. "And you'll see." Linda laughed, a cold, mocking sound that echoed through the cabin. "See what?" she said, her tone sarcastic. "You think you're special? Now, you're nothing, and you'll always be nothing." The other passengers began to gather their belongings, their whispers a mix of curiosity and discomfort. "She's been awful to that girl." A man in a suit murmured, "I hope she's okay." His companion replied, but no one intervened. Their silence a weight on Naya's shoulders. The flight attendants prepared for deboarding, their voices a soft murmur over the intercom. Emily, the attendant who had sided with Linda, approached Nia and Linda, her expression cold. "Please prepare to deboard," she said, her tone sharp, her eyes flicking to Naya with disdain. "And try not to cause any more trouble." Naya's hands clenched into fists, her voice steady. "I didn't cause trouble," she said, her words a quiet defiance. "She did." Emily's eyes narrowed, her tone cold. "You've been a problem since takeoff," she said, her words a dagger. "Maybe you should have stayed in economy." Naya's heart sank, her tears threatening to spill again. She felt the weight of their judgment, the stares of the other passengers, her shame a heavy burden. But she held on to her mother's promise. "I'm coming," her mother had said, a lifeline in the storm. The plane came to a stop at the gate, the passengers beginning to stand, their movements a quiet bustle as they gathered their bags. Nia stood, her hands trembling as she reached for her small backpack, her heart racing. She knew her mother would be waiting. She knew the truth would come out, but Linda wasn't done. Her voice loud as she stood. "Look at her," she said, her tone mocking. "She thinks she's somebody now, calling her mom to save her. Pathetic." Naya turned to her, her eyes blazing. "My mom will be here," she said, her voice steady. "And you'll see." Linda's laugh was loud, her voice a mix of amusement and contempt. "I'll see what?" she said, her tone sharp. "Another nobody trying to act important? You're wasting everyone's time." Emily nodded, her expression cold. "Let's go," she said, her tone sharp. "You're holding up the line." Naya's hands shook as she slung her backpack over her shoulder, her heart racing. She moved toward the aisle, her steps steady despite the fear. The other passengers followed, their whispers a mix of curiosity and discomfort. "She's been through enough," a woman in a silk scarf murmured. "I hope someone helps her," her companion replied, but no one intervened. Nia felt their stares, a weight she couldn't escape, her shame a heavy burden, but she held on to her mother's promise, her heart racing, her mind racing. She didn't know what would happen next, but she knew it would be big. The passengers moved toward the exit. The jet bridge, a narrow tunnel to freedom. Nia walked behind Linda and Emily, their voices a constant assault. "She's probably going to cry to her mom now," Linda said, her tone mocking. "Like that'll change anything." Emily nodded, her voice cold. "She shouldn't have been here in the first place," she said, her words a dagger. Naya's hands clenched into fists, her voice steady. "You're wrong," she said, her words a quiet defiance. "You'll see," Linda turned to her, her sneer widening. "I'll see what?" she said, her tone sharp. "You're nothing, and you'll always be nothing." Nia's heart raced, her mind racing. She stepped off the plane, her heart pounding. She knew her mother was coming. She knew the truth would come out. The tension in the jet bridge was palpable, the air thick with the weight of Linda's malice. Naya's heart raced, her mind racing. She didn't know how much longer she could hold on, but she knew help was coming. A moment of reckoning was imminent. A moment that would change everything. A moment that would reveal the truth and test her strength. Her truth, her very identity. The jet bridge at Chicago O'Hare International Airport trembled with an electric tension as passengers poured out of the SkyElite Airlines flight, their footsteps echoing in the narrow tunnel. Naya emerged into the terminal, her navy sweater still soaked, clinging to her skin like a second layer of shame. Her curly ponytail a drenched mess, strands sticking to her tear-streaked face. Her brown eyes burned with a fiery mix of hurt and defiance. Her small backpack hung limply over her shoulder, her hands clenched into fists as she stepped into the bustling airport. Linda Carter strutted ahead, her floral blouse a garish beacon of cruelty, her blue eyes glinting with malicious triumph as she turned back to Naya with a final sneer. "Run along to your mommy, little girl," she said, her voice a venomous hiss that cut through the terminal noise. "She can't fix how out of place you are." Emily, the flight attendant, trailed behind, her uniform still crisp, but her expression icy. "You've caused enough trouble," she added, her tone dripping with disdain. "Don't ever set foot on one of our flights again." Naya's heart thundered in her chest, her breath hitching as she fought back a fresh wave of tears. "I didn't cause trouble," she snapped, her voice cracking with raw emotion. "You did. You poured that water on me. You humiliated me." Linda's laugh was a sharp, cruel bark that reverberated through the crowd. "You deserved it," she spat, her tone vicious. "You're nothing, and you'll always be nothing. Nobody here believes your sob story." The other passengers paused, their murmurs swelling into a storm of whispers. "She's been awful to that girl," a man in a suit muttered, his voice low but audible. "Someone needs to stop this," his companion replied. Yet no one stepped forward, their inaction a crushing weight on Nia's shoulders. She felt their stares, a mix of pity and curiosity, her humiliation laid bare for all to see. But beneath the shame, a fire roared to life. She wouldn't let them break her. Not now, not ever. Nia squared her shoulders, her voice trembling, but resolute. "You'll see," she said, her words a quiet promise that carried the weight of a storm. "You don't know who I am, but you will." Linda's sneer twisted into a mocking grin. "Oh, I'll see what?" she taunted, her voice loud. "Your imaginary savior? You're just a sad little girl playing pretend." Emily smirked, her tone cold. "Let's go. You're holding everyone up," she said, her words a final jab. The terminal was a whirlwind of activity, travelers rushing past, oblivious to the drama unfolding at the gate. But for Naya, time seemed to slow as her eyes scanned the crowd, her heart racing with desperate hope. And then she saw her, a woman cutting through the chaos like a force of nature, her tailored black suit a stark symbol of power, her dark hair swept into a flawless updo, her brown eyes blazing with a fury that could ignite the air itself. It was Evelyn Brooks, Nia's mother, the CEO of SkyElite Airlines. Her heels clicked against the floor with a commanding rhythm, her presence a seismic shock that silenced the terminal. "Mom!" Nia cried, her voice breaking as tears spilled over, her body trembling with relief. Evelyn's gaze locked onto her daughter, her expression softening for a split second as she took in Nia's soaked sweater, her tear-streaked face, her broken spirit. But then her eyes snapped to Linda and Emily, and the softness vanished, replaced by a storm of rage that made the air crackle. "What have you done to my daughter?" she demanded, her voice a low, lethal growl that sent a shiver through the crowd. Linda's smirk vanished, her face draining of color, her hands trembling as she stumbled back. I didn't know," she stammered, her voice a panicked squeak. "I thought she didn't belong." Evelyn's eyes flashed, her voice rising like a thunderclap. "Didn't belong?" she roared, her words echoing through the terminal. "This is my daughter, and this is my airline. She belongs here more than you ever will." The crowd gasped, their whispers exploding into a frenzy. "That's Evelyn Brooks!" A woman in a silk scarf hissed. "The CEO!" Her companion gaped. "They messed with her daughter?" Emily's face turned ashen, her hands shaking as she tried to speak. "Mrs. Brooks, I didn't realize," she stammered, her voice quivering. But Evelyn cut her off, her gaze a blade of ice. "You didn't realize?" she snapped, her tone searing. "You watched a passenger assault my child, and instead of helping, you joined in. You humiliated her. You're fired, effective immediately." Emily's knees buckled, her hands flying to her mouth. "Please, I didn't mean," she pleaded, but Evelyn's voice was unyielding. "Get out of my sight," she commanded, her tone final. Emily stumbled away, her head bowed, her career shattered in an instant. Evelyn turned to Linda, her fury a living flame. "And you," she said, her voice low and deadly. "You assaulted my daughter. You dared to make her feel small. On my airline. You're banned for life, and I'll ensure you answer for this legally." Linda's face crumpled, her hands trembling as she tried to protest. "You can't do this," she shrieked, her voice desperate. "I paid for my ticket." Evelyn stepped closer, her presence towering. "I can, and I will," she said, her tone a verdict. "You don't get to treat anyone like this, least of all my child. Security, escort her out." Two airport security guards materialized, their expressions stern as they flanked Linda, her protest fading into a whimper as they led her away. The crowd watched in stunned silence, their whispers a mix of shock and awe. "She had it coming," a man in a suit murmured. "That girl's mother is a force," his companion replied. Evelyn turned to Naya, her eyes softening as she pulled her into a tight embrace. "I'm so sorry, baby," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "No one will ever make you feel like this again." Nia clung to her mother, her tears falling freely. "I knew you'd come," she whispered, her voice trembling. Evelyn pulled back, her eyes shining with love. "Always," she said, her tone a promise. She turned to the crowd, her voice clear. "SkyElite Airlines will not tolerate this behavior," she said, her words echoing through the terminal. "We stand for respect, for dignity. For every passenger, I'm implementing new policies to ensure this never happens again." The crowd erupted into applause, their cheers a wave of support. Naya felt her chest swell with pride, her mother's strength a mirror of her own. She had faced her tormentors, faced her shame, and now the truth had set her free. A moment of reckoning had arrived, a moment that would change everything, a moment that affirmed her strength, her truth, her very identity. The grand ballroom of the Global Aviation Summit in New York shimmered under the glow of crystal chandeliers, their light reflecting off the polished marble floors, the air filled with the murmur of industry leaders, airline executives, and policymakers, all gathered to discuss the future of aviation. Nia Brooks stood backstage, her emerald green dress a vibrant contrast to the muted tones of the event, her curly hair cascading over her shoulders, her brown eyes shining with a quiet confidence that had grown over the past year. She adjusted the small microphone clip to her dress, her hands steady, her heart racing with a mix of nerves and pride. She was here to deliver a keynote speech, a moment that marked the culmination of her journey. The stage was set with a large screen displaying the summit's logo, the audience a sea of faces waiting to hear her story. Nia's name had become synonymous with resilience after her ordeal on the SkyElite Airlines flight. Her mother, Evelyn Brooks, the CEO of the airline, stood beside her, her tailored black suit a symbol of authority, her eyes filled with pride. "You've got this, honey," she whispered, her voice warm. Nia smiled, her heart full. "Thanks, Mom," she replied, her tone steady. The host stepped onto the stage, her voice clear. "Our next speaker is a young woman who has become a beacon of change in our industry," she said. "Please welcome Nia Brooks." The crowd erupted into applause, their cheers a wave of support. Nia stepped onto the stage, the spotlight warm on her skin, her smile radiant as she faced the audience. "Thank you," she said, her voice clear. "I'm honored to be here," she began, her words steady. "A year ago, I was just a girl on a flight, excited to visit my grandmother. But that day turned into a nightmare. I was humiliated, slandered, and made to feel like I didn't belong, all because of how I looked." The audience listened, their silence a testament to the weight of her words. Nia continued, her voice rising with passion. "I could have let that break me, but I didn't. I stood my ground. I called for help, and my mother, Evelyn Brooks, the CEO of SkyElite, showed the world that no one gets to decide where I belong but me." The crowd applauded, their cheers a wave of support. Nia's eyes shone with emotion, her voice steady. Today, I'm here to tell you that you belong, too. No matter who you are, no matter what anyone says, your worth isn't defined by their prejudice. It's defined by your strength, your truth, your heart. The audience stood, their applause a roaring wave. Nia felt a rush of pride, her heart full. She had come so far. In the months following the incident, Nia had become a voice for change. SkyElite Airlines had implemented sweeping reforms under Evelyn's leadership: mandatory bias training for all staff, a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination, and a diversity initiative that Nia helped spearhead. She worked alongside her mother, learning the ins and outs of the airline industry, her passion for justice fueling her drive. "You're a natural leader," Evelyn had said, her voice warm. Nia had smiled. "I learned from the best," she'd replied, her tone steady. Nia also started a youth advocacy group, Fly with Dignity, a platform for young people to share their experiences of discrimination and push for change. The group gained traction, partnering with schools and community organizations to host workshops on inclusivity. Nia spoke at events, her voice clear. "We all deserve to fly with dignity," she'd say, her words echoing through crowded rooms. Her story spread, news outlets covering her journey. From humiliation to hero, teen changes airline industry. The headlines read, "Nia became a sought-after speaker, her message resonating with people around the world." At Oakwood High, Nia's classmates now saw her as a leader. "You're amazing," Tiana, and her best friend, said, her smile wide. "You're making a difference." Nia smiled. "We're making a difference," she replied, her tone steady. She started a school club to promote inclusivity. Its members a mix of students who found strength in her story. The club organized events, raising awareness about discrimination. Their voices a chorus of change. Nia's work with SkyElite also led to new opportunities. She was invited to intern at the airline's headquarters, working on community outreach programs. Her ideas bold, her passion infectious. She proposed a scholarship for underprivileged teens to learn about aviation. "I want them to know they can soar," she'd said. Her voice steady, Evelyn had nodded, her pride evident. "Let's make it happen," she'd replied. The scholarship launched. Its first recipients, a group of teens who reminded Nia of herself. Their dreams big, their spirits unbreakable. Months later, Nia stood on the stage of a national youth summit, a different audience, a different city, but the same message. "I was told I didn't belong," she said, her voice steady. "But I learned that belonging is about creating your own space, about lifting others up, about dreaming big, no matter what." The audience stood, their applause a testament to her impact. Nia took a bow, her eyes shining with tears of joy. She felt powerful, unstoppable, a force. And as she stepped off the stage, Evelyn waiting in the wings, her smile radiant. Nia knew this was just the beginning, that there would be more challenges, more dreams to chase, but she was ready to face them with the strength she'd found. The strength that had carried her from a first-class cabin of humiliation to a stage of inspiration. Nia had turned her pain into purpose, her story into a movement, and in doing so, she had shown the world that she belonged, that she mattered, that she could soar. Nia turned humiliation into triumph, revealing her mom as the airline CEO, inspiring change. Thank you for listening. Like and share if you're moved. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell for our latest stories of justice and resilience.